Jake Morrison stood at attention in Captain Bennett's office, his hands clasped behind his back to hide their trembling. The captain paced back and forth behind her desk, her face dark with anger. On the wall screen, security footage showed Jake and Princess Lyra in the observation deck 3 nights ago. "Explain this to me, Lieutenant," Captain Bennett said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Explain to me why you are having secret meetings with the one person you were specifically ordered to avoid." Jake watched the footage of himself reaching out to take the princess's hand. The image was grainy, but there was no mistaking what had happened. "Captain, I can explain ... Can you?" Bennett stopped pacing and faced him. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've committed treason. You violated every protocol we established. You put this entire mission at risk." Jake's mind raced. He couldn't tell the captain about the conspiracy, about General Krell's plan to destroy Earth. Princess Lyra had been right about that. Any direct confrontation would give the conservatives the excuse they needed to attack immediately. "Captain, the princess approached me," Jake said carefully. "She was alone, without her guards. I was trying to escort her back to her quarters. When she started asking questions about human culture, and you decided to answer them," Bennett's voice rose. "You decided to ignore your orders and have a cozy chat with the most dangerous person on this ship." "She is not dangerous," Jake said before he could stop himself. Captain Bennett stared at him. "Not dangerous? Lieutenant, she could kill every person on this ship without breaking a sweat. She represents a civilization that could wipe out humanity without a second thought. How is that not dangerous?" Jake felt frustration building in his chest. "Because she's not what we think she is. She's not cold or calculating. She's curious about us, about our emotions, about what makes us human. She wants to understand us. And you know this how?" Bennett asked suspiciously. Jake hesitated. He couldn't tell her about the mental connection, about sharing thoughts and emotions with the princess. It would sound insane. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she asked questions. "She's different from the others." Captain Bennett sat down heavily in her chair. "Morrison, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to listen carefully. The negotiations are failing. The Zephyrians are going to leave tomorrow, and when they do, they're going to recommend that their empire stay far away from humanity." Jake felt his heart sink. "Captain ... We've lost," Bennett continued, "our one chance to form an alliance with the most powerful civilization in the galaxy, and we've lost it. And now, thanks to your little romantic adventure, we might have made things even worse." "It wasn't romantic," Jake protested, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. "Wasn't it?" Bennett pulled up another piece of footage, this one showing Jake and the princess holding hands in the observation deck. "Because this looks pretty romantic to me. And if the Zephyrians see it the same way, they might decide that humans are too unpredictable to be allowed to exist." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The captain was closer to the truth than she knew, but for all the wrong reasons. "Captain, I need to tell you something," Jake began, but Bennett held up her hand. "No, you need to listen. As of right now, you are relieved of duty. You're confined to quarters until the Zephyrian delegation leaves. And if I hear about you having any more contact with Princess Lyra, I'll have you arrested for treason." Jake felt panic rising in his chest. "Captain, you don't understand. There's more going on here than just failed negotiations." "The princess told me." "The princess told you what you wanted to hear," Bennett interrupted. "That's what good manipulators do, Morrison. They make you think they care about you. They make you think you're special, and then they use you to get what they want." "That's not what happened," Jake said desperately. "Isn't it?" Bennett stood up again. "Think about it, Lieutenant. A beautiful alien princess just happens to seek you out for private conversations. She just happens to be fascinated by human culture, and she just happens to make you feel like you're the most important person in the galaxy." Jake wanted to argue, but he could see how it must look from the captain's perspective. "Captain, please. Just let me explain what she told me about ... No," Bennett said firmly. "I've heard enough. You're dismissed, Lieutenant. Report to your quarters and stay there." Jake left the captain's office feeling like his world was collapsing. Around him, he walked through the corridors of the ship, past crew members who looked at him with confusion and suspicion. Word was already spreading about his meetings with the Princess Dot in his quarters. Jake sat on his bunk and put his head in his hands. The captain was right about one thing. The negotiations were failing. Ambassador Rodriguez had looked increasingly frustrated during the past few days, and the Zephyrians had become even more formal and distant. But Captain Bennett was wrong about Princess Lyra. Jake had felt her emotions, her genuine desire to help both their peoples. He had seen the fear in her eyes when she talked about General Krell's plan. That couldn't be faked. A soft chime from his door made him look up. "Enter," he said, expecting to see Captain Bennett or one of the security officers coming to check on him. Instead, Princess Lyra stepped into his quarters, her eyes bright with urgency. "Lieutenant Morrison, we have a problem. A big problem." Jake jumped to his feet. "Your Highness, you can't be here. Captain Bennett knows about our meetings. She's confined me to quarters." "I know," the princess said. "My guards told me about the security footage. General Krell has seen it as well." Jake felt his stomach drop. "What did he say?" "He is using it as proof that humans are trying to corrupt me, to turn me against my own people," Princess Lyra explained. "He has convinced my father that I am no longer fit to lead this delegation." "What does that mean?" The princess's eyes shifted to a deep red, a color Jake had never seen before. "It means that General Krell is now in complete control. He has ordered the fleet to move into attack position. The assault on Earth will begin in less than 12 hours. Jake felt the world spinning around him. 12 hours? "But I thought we had more time." "So did I," the princess said. "But our meetings have given him the excuse he needed to move quickly. He is telling the fleet commanders that humans are dangerous, that we have been compromised by exposure to your emotions." Jake began pacing around his small quarters. "We have to warn someone. Captain Bennett, Ambassador Rodriguez, someone who can contact Earth's defenses." "It will not matter," Princess Lyra said sadly. "Your planet's defenses cannot stop a Zephyrian fleet. The attack will be over in minutes." Jake stopped pacing and looked at her. "Then what can we do?" "We can still try to stop it," the princess said. "But it will require us to take a huge risk. The biggest risk either of us has ever taken. Tell me." Princess Lyra moved closer to him. "We need to gather the evidence we talked about. Communications between General Krell and the fleet, recordings of his planning sessions, proof that this attack is not authorized by my father. How can we do that? I'm confined to quarters, and you're being watched by the general's supporters." "There is a way," the princess said. "But it means defying not just your captain's orders, but everything both our peoples believe about the barriers between us." Jake felt his heart racing. "What do you mean?" "I mean that we need to work together completely. Not just sharing information, but truly joining our minds, our abilities, our knowledge. It is something that has never been attempted between a human and a Zephyrian." Jake remembered the feeling of their mental connection, the way they had shared thoughts and emotions. "Is that possible?" "I don't know," the princess admitted. "But it might be our only chance. If we can truly merge our consciousness, even temporarily, we might be able to access the general's communications and find the evidence we need." Jake thought about what she was asking. "What are the risks?" "We could both die," Princess Lyra said simply. "The process of joining minds across species barriers has never been tested. Our brains might not be compatible. We might lose ourselves completely." Jake looked at her, seeing the fear and determination in her color-shifting eyes. "And if we don't try, then billions of humans will die, and the Zephyrian Empire will continue its slide toward extinction," she said. "There will be no hope for either of our peoples." Jake thought about Earth, about all the people who would die if General Krell's plan succeeded. He thought about his family, his friends, everyone he had ever known. Then he thought about the princess, about her people trapped in a society that had forgotten how to feel, how to live. "There's something else," Princess Lyra said quietly. "If we attempt this joining, if we survive it, we will be connected forever. Our minds, our emotions, our very souls will be linked. We will never be able to return to what we were before." Jake felt the weight of that statement. "Forever?" "Forever," she confirmed. "You will feel what I feel, know what I know, experience the world as I do. And I will do the same with you. We will become something new, something that has never existed before." Jake looked at her, this alien princess who had risked everything to try to save both their peoples. He thought about the choice he had to make. He could follow Captain Bennett's orders, stay in his quarters, and watch as if we did. Jake Morrison couldn't sleep. He lay on his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling of his quarters, replaying the events in the observation deck over and over in his mind. The feeling of touching Princess Lyra's hand, of sharing her thoughts and emotions, had been unlike anything he had ever experienced. Even now, hours later, he could still feel echoes of her loneliness and hope. A soft chime from his door made him sit up. The ship's computer announced quietly, "Visitor at door. Identity unknown." Jake's heart jumped. He got up and pressed the door control, expecting to see Captain Bennett or one of his fellow security officers. Instead, Princess Lyra stood in the corridor, wearing a simple gray robe instead of her formal royal clothing. "Your Highness," Jake whispered, looking quickly up and down the corridor. "What are you doing here? If someone sees you—" "I told my guards I was ill and needed rest," she said quietly. "They will not disturb me for several hours. We need to talk, Lieutenant Morrison. There are things you must know." Jake stepped aside to let her into his quarters. The room was small and cramped, nothing like the luxury she was probably used to. But the princess didn't seem to notice. She sat on the single chair while Jake remained standing, too nervous to sit. "I have been thinking about what happened between us," she began. "When we touched, when we shared thoughts and feelings. That should not have been possible." Jake nodded. "I've never heard of anything like that before. Is it some kind of Zephyrian ability?" "Not exactly," the princess said, her eyes shifting to a deep blue. "Long ago, my people had the same capacity for emotions that humans do. We could feel joy, sadness, anger, love. We could also share these feelings with others through physical contact, the way we did tonight." Jake felt a chill. What happened to that ability? "We gave it up," Princess Lyra said sadly. "About 1,000 years ago, our empire was tearing itself apart. Wars between different worlds, rebellions, chaos everywhere. The ruling class decided that emotions were the problem. They developed ways to suppress these feelings, to create a society based on logic and control." She stood and walked to the small window in Jake's quarters. The treatment was given to everyone, generation after generation. Eventually, most Zephyrians lost the ability to feel strong emotions. They became calm, obedient, predictable. Perfect. Citizens for a perfect empire. "But you still have emotions," Jake observed. "Some of us do," the princess replied. "The treatment doesn't work on everyone. About 1 in every 1,000 Zephyrians is born with the old emotional capacity. We are called the flawed." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. "Flawed? That's terrible. Your emotions aren't a flaw. They're what make you alive." Princess Lyra turned to look at him, her eyes now a warm gold. "That is exactly what I hoped you would say. Do you understand now why I requested to lead this delegation? Why I wanted to meet with humans?" "You're looking for a way to help your people remember how to feel again," Jake said. "Yes," she nodded, "but it's more complicated than that. There are others like me in the Zephyrian Empire. We have been studying human behavior for decades, learning about your emotions, your creativity, your ability to adapt and grow. We believe that contact with humans could help our people rediscover what they have lost." Jake sat down on his bunk, trying to process this information. But the conservative faction, your father's advisors, they don't want that to happen. They are terrified of it, the princess said. They have built their power on the idea that emotions are dangerous, that order must be maintained at all costs. If the Zephyrian people learned that emotions could be a strength rather than a weakness, it would threaten everything the conservatives believe. She moved closer to Jake, her expression becoming urgent. That is why the negotiations are failing. The conservatives never intended to form an alliance with humanity. They came here to study you, to learn about your weaknesses, and then to eliminate you before you could influence our people. Jake felt his blood run cold. Eliminate us? You mean genocide, the princess said quietly. They plan to destroy Earth and all human colonies. They will make it look like an accident, perhaps a natural disaster, or an attack by the Devourers. No one will ever know that the Zephyrian Empire was responsible. Jake stood up, his hands shaking with anger and fear. When? Soon, Princess Lyra replied. My father's chief advisor, General Krell, has already sent word to the fleet. They are positioning themselves around your solar system. Within days, they will be ready to strike. We have to warn someone, Jake said, moving toward the door. Captain Bennett, Ambassador Rodriguez, someone who can ... Stop, the princess said firmly. If you tell your superiors about this conversation, they will have no choice but to confront the Zephyrian delegation. General Krell will use that as proof that humans are aggressive and unpredictable. It will give him the excuse. He needs to attack immediately. Jake felt trapped. Then what can we do? Princess Lyra walked to him and placed her hand on his arm. Again, Jake felt that strange connection, that sharing of thoughts and emotions. There is another way, but it is dangerous. Very dangerous. Tell me, Jake said. There are others flawed among my delegation, she explained. Not many, but enough. They have been pretending to be loyal to the conservative faction, but they are actually working to prevent the attack on humanity. Jake felt a spark of hope. How many? 3 others besides myself, the princess said. My personal advisor, Counselor Mira, and 2 of my guards. There may be more among the ship crews, but we cannot be certain. That's not very many against an entire empire, Jake said. No, it is not, the princess agreed. But we have advantages that the conservatives do not expect. We understand human nature in ways they do not. We can feel emotions, make quick decisions, adapt to changing situations. Most importantly, we can work together with humans in ways that the conservatives think is impossible. Jake began to understand. You want to expose the conspiracy. More than that, Princess Lyra said, her eyes brightening to a brilliant gold. I want to prove that cooperation between humans and Zephyrians is not only possible, but necessary for both our peoples to survive. She moved to the window and looked out at the stars. The Devourers are not the only threat we face. There are other dangers in the galaxy, forces that neither humans nor Zephyrians can fight alone. But together, combining human creativity and emotion with Zephyrian technology and knowledge, we could build something new. Something stronger than either of our peoples could achieve alone. Jake felt her vision through their connection, and it took his breath away. He saw human and Zephyrian crews working together on massive starships. He saw scientists from both species sharing knowledge and making discoveries that neither could achieve alone. He saw children growing up in a galaxy where cooperation and diversity were valued over control and uniformity. It's beautiful, he whispered. It is what could be, the princess said. But first, we must stop General Krell and his followers. We must expose their plan and show both our peoples that there is another way. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. What do you need me to do? I need you to help me gather evidence, Princess Lyra said. Communications between General Krell and the fleet, recordings of their planning sessions, anything that proves they intend to attack Earth. How can I do that? I'm just a security officer. I don't have access to Zephyrian communications. The princess smiled. But you have something more valuable than access. You have the ability to think like a human, to see solutions that a logical Zephyrian mind would miss. You can help me and my allies find ways to get the evidence we need. Jake thought about this. It would mean working together in secret. More meetings like this one. Yes, the princess nodded. And each meeting increases the risk that we will be discovered. If General Krell learns what we are doing, he will not hesitate to kill us both. Jake looked at her, seeing the fear and determination in her color-shifting eyes. Why are you willing to take that risk? Princess Lyra was quiet for a long moment. Because I have seen what my people have become. We are a dying civilization, Lieutenant Morrison. We have technology and power, but we have lost our souls. We follow orders without question, live lives without passion, and face death without hope. She turned to face him fully. But when I touched your hand, when I felt your emotions, I remembered what it was like to be truly alive. I felt hope for the first time in years. I felt joy. I felt love. Jake felt his heart skip a beat. Love? Love for my people, for the future we could build together, she said quickly. But Jake could sense there was more to it than that. I cannot let General Krell destroy that possibility. I cannot let him kill your people and condemn mine to an eternity of emptiness. Jake made his decision. Then we'll stop him, whatever it takes. The princess reached out and took his hand again, and Jake felt the full force of her gratitude and determination. Thank you, Lieutenant Morrison. Together, we might just save both our peoples. As she prepared to leave, Jake had one more question. Your Highness, what happens if we succeed? What happens if we stop the attack and expose the conspiracy? Princess. Lyra paused at the door. Then we will have to face an even greater challenge. We will have to convince two entire civilizations to trust. Jake Morrison walked slowly through the empty corridors of the Harmony's Edge, his footsteps echoing in the quiet. The negotiations had been going on for 3 days now, and the tension was getting worse with each passing hour. The Zephyrians seemed polite but distant, answering questions with short, formal responses that gave away nothing about their true intentions. He made his way to the observation deck, a small room with a large window that looked out into the stars. It was his favorite place on the ship, especially during the night shift when most of the crew was asleep. The endless view of space always helped him think more clearly. The observation deck was empty when he arrived, just as he had hoped. Jake stood in front of the massive window, watching the stars slowly drift by as the ship moved through space. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of human eyes, was the Zephyrian fleet. Massive ships filled with beings who had mastered the galaxy while humanity was still learning to make fire. Jake pressed his hand against the cool glass and sighed. The negotiations were not going well. Ambassador Rodriguez had tried everything she could think of, but the Zephyrians remained uninterested in forming an alliance. They asked detailed questions about human technology and military capabilities, but they offered nothing in return. They're just studying us, he whispered to himself, like we're insects under a microscope. The worst part was watching Princess Lyra during the meetings. She sat perfectly still, her face showing no emotion, her eyes that strange gray color that meant nothing to human observers. But Jake had begun to notice small things. The way she tilted her head slightly when Ambassador Rodriguez spoke about human creativity. The way her fingers tapped silently on the table when the conversation turned to human emotions. You're different from the others. Jake spun around, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. Princess Lyra stood in the doorway, alone and without her guards. Her silver skin seemed to glow in the dim light of the observation deck, and her eyes were shifting through colors he had never seen before. Your Highness, Jake said, snapping to attention. You shouldn't be here? Where are your guards? The princess stepped into the room, and Jake noticed that she moved differently than she did during the formal meetings. Less rigid, more natural. I told them I needed time to meditate. They are waiting outside the diplomatic chambers. Jake's mind raced. This was exactly what Captain Bennett had warned him about. He needed to leave immediately to report this breach of protocol, but his feet wouldn't move. "Your Highness, I need to escort you back to your quarters," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's not safe for you to be wandering the ship alone." Princess Lyra smiled, and Jake felt his breath catch. It was the first genuine expression he had seen from her since she arrived. "Safe? Lieutenant Morrison, I could destroy this entire ship with a thought. I am probably the safest being in this part of the galaxy." She knew his name. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How did she know his name? "I have been watching you," the princess continued, moving closer to the window. "During the negotiations, while my advisors spoke with your diplomats, I studied your crew. Most of them look at us with fear or curiosity, but you ... you look at us with understanding." Jake swallowed hard. "I don't understand what you mean, Your Highness." "You see things that others miss," she said, turning to face him. "When my advisor spoke about our military strength, you noticed that his eyes never changed color. When we discussed our technology, you saw how my guards never moved or reacted. You understand that we are not as unified as we appear." Jake felt his heart pounding. This was dangerous territory. "Your Highness, I really think you should return to your quarters. If someone sees yous together ... what will happen?" the princess asked, her eyes shifting to a deep blue. "Will your captain punish you? Will my father's advisors be angry? What is the worst that could happen, Lieutenant Morrison?" "War," Jake said quietly. "War between our peoples. The destruction of everything we've worked for." Princess Lyra nodded. Slowly. "Yes, that is what they told you. That is what they told me as well. But I have studied your people for many years, and I have learned something interesting about humans." She moved closer to Jake, and he could smell something like flowers and starlight. "Your people feel things so deeply. Joy, sadness, anger, love. These emotions guide your actions in ways that my people cannot understand. We have spent centuries trying to eliminate such feelings from our society." "Why?" Jake asked, forgetting protocol for a moment. "Because emotions are unpredictable," the princess replied. "They make people do unexpected things. They cause chaos and disorder. My people believe that a perfect society must be controlled, planned, and logical." Jake looked at her carefully. "But you don't believe that." The princess was quiet for a long moment. "I have watched your people from afar. I have seen how your emotions drive you to create beautiful art, to explore dangerous places, to sacrifice yourselves for others. These are not the actions of a weak species. These are the actions of a species that truly lives." She walked to the window and placed her hand against the glass, just as Jake had done minutes before. "My people have forgotten how to live, Lieutenant Morrison. We exist. We follow rules. We maintain order. But we do not feel joy when we see a beautiful sunset. We do not feel wonder when we discover something new. We do not feel love for our families or friends." Jake felt a strange pulling sensation in his chest. "That sounds lonely." "It is," the princess said softly. "Very lonely." Without thinking, Jake stepped closer to her. "Your Highness, during the negotiations, I've noticed that your eyes change color. What does that mean?" Princess Lyra turned to look at him, and her eyes shifted to a warm gold. "You noticed that? No one has asked me about that in centuries. The color changes show our emotions, but my people have learned to suppress them. They keep their eyes gray to show perfect control, but yours change all the time," Jake observed. "Yes," she said. "I have never been able to fully control them. My father's advisors see this as a weakness. They believe it makes me unfit to rule." Jake felt a surge of anger. "That's ridiculous. Your curiosity, your questions during the meetings, those show intelligence, not weakness." The princess stared at him in surprise. "You think my curiosity is a strength?" "Of course," Jake said. "How can you learn anything new if you're not curious? How can you grow if you're not willing to ask questions? Princess Lyra stepped closer to him, her eyes now a brilliant blue. The negotiations are failing, Lieutenant Morrison. My father's advisors have already decided that humanity is too chaotic to be our allies. They plan to recommend that we leave tomorrow. Jake felt his stomach drop. But the Devourers, if we don't work together, both our peoples will fall. The princess finished. I know this. You know this. But my advisors believe that perfect order is more important than survival. Jake looked at her desperate expression and made a decision that would change everything. What if there was another way? What do you mean? Jake took a deep breath. What if we could show them that human emotions aren't a weakness? What if we could prove that our ability to feel and adapt is exactly what both our peoples need? Princess Lyra moved even closer, and Jake could see the hope building in her color-shifting eyes. How? I don't know yet, Jake admitted. But I know that giving up isn't the answer. There has to be a way to bridge the gap between our peoples. The princess reached out her hand, and Jake saw her fingers trembling slightly. Lieutenant Morrison, there is something I must tell you. Something that could change everything. Jake looked at her outstretched hand. He knew that touching her would be the ultimate violation of protocol. It could end his career, start a war, and destroy any chance of an alliance between their peoples. But he also knew that sometimes the right thing to do was not the safe thing to do. Jake reached out and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, Jake felt something impossible happen. A wave of sensation crashed over him, and suddenly he could feel what the princess was feeling. Her loneliness, her curiosity, her desperate hope that her people could learn to live again. But there was more than that. He could sense her thoughts. Her memories, her deep understanding of both human and Zephyrian nature died at the same time. Princess Lyra gasped as Jake's emotions flooded through her. His determination, his compassion, his fierce loyalty to his people, and his growing understanding of hers. She felt his frustration with the failed negotiations and his burning desire to find a solution that would save both their civilizations. How is this possible? Jake whispered, his voice shaking. I don't know, the princess replied, her eyes now glowing with a color Jake had never seen before. But I can feel your thoughts, your emotions. It's like I'm experiencing what? It means to be human. Jake could feel her amazement, her wonder at experiencing such intense emotions for the first time in her life. But he could also sense something else, something that made his blood run cold. The negotiations, he said urgently. They're not just failing. There's something else happening, isn't there? Princess Lyra's grip on his hand tightened. Yes, my father's advisors aren't just planning to leave. They're planning to make sure that humanity never becomes a threat to our perfect order. Jake Morrison stood at his assigned position in the main docking bay, watching the massive doors slowly open to reveal the void of space beyond. His heart hammered against his ribs as he gripped his sidearm, though he knew it would be useless against the advanced technology of the Zephyrians. The weapon was more for show than protection. The docking bay was the largest space on the Harmony's edge, but it suddenly felt tiny as the Zephyrian shuttle approached. The craft was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. It moved without any visible engines, gliding through space like a living thing. Its surface seemed to shift and change color as it moved, reflecting the stars around it. Captain Bennett stood near the airlock with Ambassador Claire Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed woman with graying hair who had negotiated treaties with a dozen different alien species. But Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. This was bigger than anything she had handled before. Remember your positions, Bennett's voice crackled through Jake's earpiece. Nobody moves unless I give the order. Nobody speaks unless spoken to. And Morrison, keep your eyes on the crowd, not on our guests. Jake nodded, though he knew the captain couldn't see him from across the bay. Around him, 20 other security personnel stood at attention, their faces blank and professional. But Jake noticed the sweat on their foreheads, the way their hands trembled slightly as they held their weapons. the shuttle touched down with barely a whisper of sound. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a section of the craft's hull simply dissolved, creating a perfect doorway where none had existed before. Jake blinked, wondering if he had imagined it. The first beings to emerge were the guards. They were tall, easily 7 feet in height, and wore armor that seemed to be made of liquid metal. Their faces were hidden behind masks that reflected the light like mirrors. They moved with perfect coordination, spreading out to form a protective circle around the shuttle's entrance. Jake forced himself to look away from the guards and scan the crowd of human personnel who had gathered to witness this historic moment. Engineers, scientists, and diplomats all stood watching with wide eyes. Some had tablets in their hands, recording everything. Others simply stared in amazement. Then she appeared. Princess Lyra Veltar stepped out of the shuttle, and Jake felt his breath catch despite himself. The images in the briefing room had not prepared him for seeing her in person. She was tall and graceful, moving with a fluid elegance that seemed almost like dancing. Her skin had that silver tint he had seen in the pictures, but in person it seemed to glow with its own inner light. Her hair was long and white, flowing behind her like water, but it was her eyes that held Jake's attention. They shifted from deep blue to emerald green to golden yellow, cycling through colors like a living rainbow. When she looked around the docking bay, her gaze seemed to take in everything at once. Jake quickly looked away, remembering Captain Bennett's warnings. He focused on a group of engineers near the back of the crowd, watching their reactions instead of the princess herself. "Welcome aboard the Harmony's Edge," Ambassador Rodriguez said, stepping forward with a formal bow. "I am Ambassador Claire Rodriguez, representing the United Earth government. We are honored by your presence." The princess studied the ambassador for a long moment before responding. When she spoke, her voice was musical, with tones that seemed to vibrate in Jake's chest even from across the room. "I am Princess Lyra Veltar of the Zephyrian Empire," she said. "I speak for my father, Emperor Veltar the Eternal, and for all the worlds under our protection. We come in peace, seeking understanding between our peoples." Jake noticed something strange in her voice. The words were formal and proper, exactly what he would expect from a royal diplomat. But there was something else there, something that sounded almost like curiosity. The princess continued speaking. "We have studied your species for many years. You are young, but you have achieved much in a short time. You have spread across your solar system and now reached toward the stars. This shows ... potential." Ambassador Rodriguez smiled. "We hope to learn much from your ancient wisdom, Your Highness. Perhaps we can find ways to benefit each other." As the formal greetings continued, Jake let his eyes wander over the other Zephyrians who had emerged from the shuttle. There were 5 of them besides the princess, all wearing robes that seemed to be made of starlight. They stood perfectly still, their faces showing no emotion at all, but the princess was different. While the others remained statue-like, she turned her head slightly, looking around the docking bay with what Jake could only describe as interest. Her color-shifting eyes seemed to linger on the human faces in the crowd. "If you would follow me," Ambassador Rodriguez said, gesturing toward the corridor that led to the diplomatic chambers, "we have prepared a place for our discussions." The group began to move, with the princess and her guards in the center and the human diplomats surrounding them. Jake and the other security personnel took positions along the walls, creating a protective corridor. As they walked, Jake noticed that the princess seemed to be studying everything around her. She looked at the walls, the ceiling, the floor, but mostly she looked at the humans. Her gaze would dart from face to face, as if she was trying to memorize each person she saw. When they reached the diplomatic chambers, Jake took his assigned position near the back wall. The room had been specially prepared for this meeting, with a large circular table in the center and chairs for both humans and Zephyrians. The walls were decorated with artwork from Earth, showing mountains, oceans, and forests. The princess paused when she saw the artwork, her eyes shifting to a deep blue color. She walked slowly around the room, looking at each image with what appeared to be fascination. "These are representations of your homeworld," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, Your Highness," Ambassador Rodriguez replied. "We thought you might like to see the beauty of Earth." "Beauty," the princess repeated, as if the word was new to her. "This is an interesting concept. We have studied your use of this word, but seeing these images helps us understand it better." Jake watched as the princess stopped in front of a painting of a sunset over the ocean. Her eyes had changed to a golden color, and for a moment, her formal expression seemed to soften. "On Zephyria Prime, our world is uniform," she said quietly. "The same structures, the same colors, the same patterns everywhere. We have achieved perfect order. But this," she gestured at the painting, "this is not ordered, yet you call it beautiful." Ambassador Rodriguez seemed uncertain how to respond. "Beauty doesn't always come from order, Your Highness. Sometimes it comes from change, from variety, from the unexpected." The princess turned to look at the ambassador, and Jake saw something flash across her face. Surprise? Interest? It was gone too quickly to be sure. "The unexpected," the princess said. "Another concept we have studied. Your species seems to value unpredictability in ways that we find difficult to understand." As the formal negotiations began, Jake found himself studying the princess more carefully. She sat perfectly straight, her hands folded in her lap, her expression neutral. But her eyes continued to shift colors, and Jake began to wonder if those color changes meant something. When Ambassador Rodriguez spoke about humanity's achievements in space exploration, the princess's eyes turned blue. When she talked about human art and culture, they shifted to green. And when she mentioned humanity's capacity for growth and change, they became a brilliant gold. The other Zephyrians showed no such reactions. They sat like statues, their faces blank, their eyes a steady gray color. They spoke only when directly addressed, and their responses were short and formal. But the princess was different. She asked questions. She wanted to know about human emotions, about why humans created art, about how human societies could function without rigid control. Her questions were intelligent and thoughtful, but there was something else in them too. There was longing. Jake realized he was staring and quickly looked away. He focused on the other humans in the room, watching for any signs of trouble. But he found his eyes drawn back to the princess again and again. During a break in the negotiations, the princess stood and walked to the window that looked out into space. Jake watched as she placed her hand against the glass, her eyes shifting to a deep purple color he hadn't seen before. "So many stars," she said softly, though Jake wasn't sure if she was talking to anyone in particular. "So many possibilities." "Ambassador." Rodriguez joined her at the window. "The galaxy is vast, Your Highness. There's room for all of us to grow and explore." The princess turned to look at the ambassador, and Jake saw something in her expression that made his heart skip. It was hope, mixed with something that looked almost like sadness. "Growth," the princess said. "Change. These are concepts my people have forgotten. We have been the same for so long that we have forgotten what it means to become something new." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. This was not the cold, calculating ruler he had been warned about. This was someone who was curious about humanity, someone who might be looking for something her own people couldn't provide. As the negotiations resumed, Jake found himself wondering what it would be like to talk to her, to answer her questions about humanity directly. But Jake Morrison stood at attention in the briefing room, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the massive screen showing star charts. The room smelled of recycled air and coffee, the same as every other day aboard the diplomatic vessel. Harmony's edge, but today felt different. Today, everything would change. Captain Lisa Bennett walked into the room, her boots clicking against the metal floor. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Jake had served under her for 3 years, but he had never seen her look this serious before. "Lieutenant Morrison," she said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship's engines. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest level. Do you understand? Jake nodded. Yes, Captain. Bennett pressed a button on the table, and the star chart changed to show a massive fleet of ships. The vessels were unlike anything Jake had ever seen. They were sleek and curved, almost like they had been grown rather than built. Each ship was easily 10 times the size of the Harmony's Edge. These are Zephyrian ships, Bennett said. They arrived at the edge of our solar system 3 days ago. We've been trying to make contact with them for over 50 years. This is our first chance. Jake felt his heart beat faster. The Zephyrians were legendary. They controlled a vast empire that stretched across thousands of star systems. Some people said they were the oldest civilization in the galaxy. Others claimed they had technology that could destroy entire worlds with a thought. The Zephyrians have agreed to meet with us, Bennett continued. But they have very strict rules, very strict. If we break even one of their customs, they will leave. And if they leave angry, they might decide that humanity is too dangerous to exist. The captain walked closer to Jake. Her expression was grave. That's where you come in, Lieutenant. You've been selected for the security detail during the negotiations. Your job is to watch, to learn, and to make sure nothing goes wrong. Jake straightened his shoulders. I understand, Captain. What are their customs? Bennett pressed another button. The screen now showed what looked like a human woman, but there was something different about her. Her skin had a slight silver tint, and her eyes seemed to shift color from blue to green to gold. She was beautiful in a way that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. This is Princess Lyra Veltar, Bennett said. She is the daughter of the Zephyrian Emperor. She will be leading their delegation. Jake studied the image. The princess looked young, maybe in her 20s, but her eyes held an ancient wisdom. That made her seem much older. Here's what you need to know, Bennett said, her voice becoming even more serious. Under no circumstances are you to approach Princess Lyra. You are not to speak to her. You are not to look at her directly for more than a few seconds. You are not to be in the same room as her unless absolutely necessary. Why? Jake asked, surprised by the strictness of the rules. Because to the Zephyrians she is sacred, Bennett explained. In their culture, the royal family is considered to be touched by the gods. Only other royalty or their highest priests are allowed to interact with her. If a common person like you or me were to approach her, it would be seen as an insult so great that it could start a war. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What happens if someone accidentally breaks this rule? There are no accidents with the Zephyrians, Bennett replied. They plan everything down to the smallest detail. If you break their protocols, they will assume you did it on purpose. And the punishment for insulting their princess is death. The captain began pacing around. The room? The Zephyrians are not like us, Morrison. They don't think like us. They don't feel like us. Everything they do is calculated, planned, and controlled. They have been ruling their empire for thousands of years using logic and discipline. Emotion is seen as weakness in their culture. Jake tried to process this information. If they're so different from us, why do they want to meet? Bennett stopped pacing and looked at him. Because we have something they need. And they have something we desperately need. The screen changed again, showing a map of the galaxy. Large sections were marked in red. These areas are controlled by something called the Devourers. They're a race of machines that consume entire planets for resources. They've been moving toward our part of the galaxy for the past century. Jake stared at the red sections. They were huge, covering what looked like millions of star systems. The Zephyrians have been fighting the Devourers for a long time, Bennett explained. They have weapons and shields that can stop them, but they're losing. Their empire is too rigid, too controlled. They can't adapt fast enough to fight an enemy that changes its tactics constantly. And what do we have that they need? Jake asked. Bennett smiled for the first time since entering the room. We have something they lost long ago. We have the ability to change, to adapt, to think in new ways. We have creativity and unpredictability. We have emotions. Jake was confused. But you said emotions are seen as weakness in their culture. They are, Bennett nodded. But some of the younger Zephyrians are starting to think differently. They're beginning to understand that their rigid ways are failing them. Princess Lyra is rumored to be one of these progressive thinkers. The captain sat down across from Jake. Here's what we know about the princess. She's brilliant, possibly the smartest person in the Zephyrian Empire. She studied human culture and behavior for years. Some of our intelligence sources suggest that she specifically requested to lead this delegation. Why would she do that? Jake asked. We don't know, Bennett admitted. But we do know that there are factions within the Zephyrian government that don't want this alliance to happen. They think humans are too chaotic, too emotional, too unpredictable. They would rather destroy us than risk their perfect order being disrupted. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. So if anything goes wrong during these negotiations, humanity could be wiped out, Bennett finished. Yes, that's exactly what could happen. The captain stood up and walked to the window that looked out into space. Morrison, I chose you for this assignment because you have something special. You notice things that others miss. You can read people, understand their feelings. But for the next week, I need you to forget all of that. I need you to follow orders exactly. I need you to stay away from the princess no matter what. What if she tries to approach me? Jake asked. Bennett turned to face him, her expression deadly serious. She won't. The Zephyrians don't do anything without planning it first. The princess will be surrounded by guards at all times. She will only speak to Ambassador Rodriguez and the other senior diplomats. Your job is to watch the crowd, to look for threats, to make sure nothing disrupts the negotiations. Jake nodded, but something about this didn't feel right. If the princess was so interested in human culture, wouldn't she be curious about the humans she was meeting? The Zephyrian delegation will arrive in 6 hours, Bennett continued. You have until then to study their customs, their language, and their history. I want you to know everything about them. But remember, Morrison, look but don't touch. Watch, but don't interact. Our entire species depends on you following these rules. As the captain left the room, Jake remained standing by the window. He looked out at the stars and wondered what the Zephyrians were really like. Were they as cold and calculating as everyone said? Or was there something more to them, something that the intelligence reports had missed? In 6 hours, he would find out. In 6 hours, he would meet beings from another world. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had been told about staying away from the princess was about to become very, very difficult too. Follow